Welcome everyone to this month's meeting of the Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority for Harrisburg, and I will call the meeting to order at 3 p.m. And we do have a quorum present, and so we are about to begin business. First up is approval of the minutes for our last meeting, which was on June 25th. Those were emailed to the board in advance. Hope you've all had an opportunity to review. Do you have any additions or corrections? Hearing none, motion to approve is submitted.
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Second. Thank you. Discussion on the motion. None. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right. Chair report. I have very brief report. I didn't have an opportunity to meet with the mayor since our last meeting. Normally we've done that in preparation last week, and her vacation schedule and a handful of other things. I've had quality time with her for several other projects we're involved with. And for the board's information, in case you haven't seen the media, I've been asked to sit on a panel for determination and scoring of eligible vendors for the $8 million in affordable housing program projects that is being released by the city under the federal. No, this is the $8 million released under ARPA. Thank you. So yes, so that's coming up, and we'll get into that in more detail another time. Otherwise, the thing that really are happy to see is the next thing up on our agenda, and that is we are proceeding with creation of an economic development plan. We talked about this at our prior couple meetings, and we had Ryan Unger from CREDIC as well as Henry Mark Robertson from the city to talk about that cooperative effort and moving forward, something that we've been looking for since the creation of this board, and so we're happy to see that it is getting underway. Since the last meeting, Penn Live had its community meeting, remarkably well attended. I signed in too late and I wasn't able to get a ticket, so I watched virtually, as I think was the case for a few others here. But it was not sponsored by CREDIC or by the city, but rather by Penn Live, with a panel of its choosing. And generally, I think platitudes aside, really covered some interesting territory. Penn Live's starting point has been a comparison between Harrisburg and Lancaster. The two are not the same. There's significant differences between any two cities, but makeup, composition, primary economic drivers of the two cities are completely different. But there were some, I think, fundamental ideas coming out of the Lancaster experience that might apply well here in Harrisburg. Most notably, they talked about two things. One was to have the community really be the driver of the process rather than the city government. The city government, of course, is a partner, a close partner in all of it, but for any economic development to be really successful, it has to draw in the full community. And second, when they talked about community involvement, it's not just the developers, it's not just any particular segment of the community, but rather the money sources are important, but equally important are the thought leaders and the entrepreneurs and others and businesses of all sizes who contribute to the effort. And then keeping in mind the synergy among the different neighborhoods and how they work together to draw on those talents and build some momentum on the city's behalf. So with that very brief opening, I'd just like to open it up for the members of the board to.
Yeah, I just have one comment. Maybe I'll start the conversation. I know that we had talked a little bit about what had the project in Pittsburgh,
right,
which also is not identical, both in challenge and scope, to what the project will be here in Harrisburg. But am I correct or wrong? I'm not as familiar with the Pittsburgh project. Did they focus, because Pittsburgh has a lot of neighborhood issues also. not just downtown, not just whatever they call it, the Golden Triangle, or whatever it is. But was that project, since you're familiar with it, was that more downtown centric, or was that neighborhood as well?
So that one is actually two-part. One is a 10-year comprehensive regional plan, and then a more focused plan for the downtown area. And downtown area is project focused. So things like redevelopment of Market Square and conversion of office space to residential, and list of other things like that. But it is more downtown focused. Yes.
Because I think certainly the sense I got from even in the Penn Live is there's lots of neighborhood economic development issues in Harrisburg that's much more than just downtown.
And the panelists with Harrisburg experience talked about that a great deal, most notably up on Allison Hill and some of the communities up there that are really driving neighborhood development in terms of businesses and other activity. In my couple of conversations with the mayor and also with Gloria and Ryan, there's a recognition that has to be part of the process, but at the same time, because the downtown is the focal point for regionally, that's everyone's first notion of what Harrisburg is about. And so begin here, but then have a plan that's going to have carrying capacity for the joint neighborhoods. Welcome others for comments.
I liked the comment from the consultant that nobody comes downtown to park, that you come downtown for some other purpose, and that the parking was ancillary for some reason. That just struck with me because I know that's often a criticism that we hear. And if I may add, I am amazed, when I told people before that my personal schedule has changed. So at this point, 5 days a week, I generally go up 7th Street and then up Division and then onto 2nd Street up to my law office. And it's amazing to me, and I like it, that the Uptown Shopping Center has just recently paved its parking lot, painted lines, put in curb markings, and there's a new convenience store that I have not yet been into that has just opened literally at McClay and 7th. So that neighborhood is clearly doing some very interesting things. And if the school project finds a home with one of the people that are talking about redeveloping it, that could make it also a huge difference in Uptown Harrisburg. So it's nice when we're seeing so many storefronts closing to see that sort of renewal going on, just kind of on its own, if you will.
So what are our next steps still?
So at this point, there's two main things that Creative is working on. One is bringing in a consultant to do work comparable to what was done in Lancaster, not focused the same, but rather focused for our particular needs. And second is developing a set of work groups. And I'm framing it that way purposely. I think the notion is to have a core work group that has overall responsibility for how the project is marshaled and developed, but then have a set of other work groups that take broader advantage of community. I think note was taken of the several hundred people who were in attendance at Penn Live and those who weren't able to get there as well. And the genuine interest on behalf of the neighborhoods. And then, as I mentioned before, the note that was made of the success driven by entrepreneurs, small businesses, and others that can contribute to the planning process as well. And I think the other point too is that they're working on a project-focused basis as opposed to a, broad, we hope, set of objectives. So particular focuses on neighborhood streets, buildings, to build up toward a larger a larger comprehensive plan. The other thing that's going to be interesting too, I think, is the ability to sustain and build on residential conversions, because that was something that Lancaster noted in particular was a hallmark of its success. And the developers in Harrisburg say very much the same thing. We're far too focused on state and workforce traffic on the streets and not focused enough on residential traffic on the streets. And it's kind of a domino effect. The more people you see on the streets, the more attractive you are for businesses to relocate there. And so if you can replace some of the state workforce with people who live here, shop here, are walking to and from their homes, that can generate that sense of community that's a success driver. So for us, at our last meeting, we authorized up to $50,000 to be a Kickstarter or bridge funding to Creative while they await funding from the Commonwealth as a part of any day now budget. The request in the Commonwealth is for about $300,000 to fund the effort. Based on some of the conversation at the last meeting and since, we've asked our council to give us the full and clear sign off on the legality, meets and bounds of how our contribution to the effort would work. The off the cuff evaluation is that it shouldn't be a problem, but when he's present at our September meeting, we will have the full written review.
One additional comment, if I may, and a question. The additional comment being, I was frankly surprised during that presentation on Zoom to hear that Strawberry Square is serving as such a small business incubator. And I thought that was absolutely wonderful. They were talking about the number of businesses they've brought in. One is a dog, I think it's just dogs, but it may be dog and cat, I'm not sure. Grooming business that has located here that seems to be doing very nicely. There's a new plant store, and Brad Jonesy is also talking about a non-alcoholic bar, which I thought was interesting since at this point so many of the younger people are not turning to alcohol. So those just seemed like the right things to be bringing in and interesting things to bring in. Because when I've been spending time in Lancaster recently, there are just interesting places. There are fun restaurants. There are just places you want to go into and find out what's inside. And I think that's really neat. The question being, if someone is interested in a work group, because I've had someone approach me already who I think would be a real resource, where do we send them? Can we put something on the website eventually?
We can, and Creative is collecting names. And yeah, we've had a number of those discussions already with Ryan. So
if Creative establishes a web page that we can link
To that.
to their page, I don't know if they've done that yet with the project, but I'm sure at some point there'll be a project, either its own website or part of a website, and then we can funnel people to wherever that is if they come to us first. That's not a problem.
I like to capture people when they're expressing the
Sure,
interest.
sure. I think Creative is the organizing part.
good.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Very good. Anything else on that agenda? Ryan also got in touch with me a couple of days ago, asked if he should be at this meeting, and to note that once they're a little farther along in getting their consultant, we'll invite them back
Sure.
in.
You can always just come and hang out with us. We don't.
Oh, I told him that too, but you know. If he shows up, we'll let you speak. All right, next is I would like to welcome Charlie Bruner to our meeting. He is Harrisburg City Controller, almost emeritus. Almost. But has been controlled for quite some time now, and has done some exemplary work on behalf of the city. And from that very much needed perspective, and Mike Thomas is with him, who is his deputy. And this isn't a swan song invitation per se, but, you know, we still wanted to have you in sometime before you left, and we thought this would be a great opportunity. First, to thank you for your service, and then to invite you to give us your perspective on how the city's finances are progressing. I'll note as well that the Controller's Office furnishes us a monthly report for review as well, and does comparisons against Brian's numbers, admittedly from a different set of eyes, but also from a little bit different accounting methodology, which is also helpful to give a complete, I won't say contrasting, because that sounds like it's a disagreement figure, but at least it's a different means of looking at how the numbers are cast and what their meaning is. So, I'd like to turn it over to you, say a few words.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. You know, it's talking about the progress of the city's financial condition, and maybe we just going into fake bank notes. Real bank notes, yeah. Real bank notes. We're still in fake bank notes. Yeah. And not that as a problem, but you guys, but when I got there, we were significant debt. And I know a lot of the big debt got paid off with the sale of our assets, both the parking, the incinerator. Both of those things, while necessary, maybe they certainly have put a crimp in how things get done here. Parking has been, in my opinion, one of the worst things we got involved in as well. But when you go out there in the middle of the day and there's nobody parking, and then they turned around and said, "We're not making any money on this. We think we ought to raise the fee." Well, you're crazy. You can't sell it at $2. We're going to sell it at $2.50. And I just think that this whole parking thing has been I would love to figure out a way to buy it back. That's just a goal I think we should be focusing on to get control back over our parking. Anyway, we were able to, once we got past some of that big debt, we still ended up with a $20-some million debt for other sundry issues that we had, and that's paid off. I was able to fight off alternatives to refinance that, which would have cost us in the neighborhood of $6 or $7 million in finance charges. And I can see very clearly we have the money to pay it off. And I'm glad we were able to get that done. You know, one of the things that we have now, I think we could thank Pappin for his work in getting the permanency to the LST and the earned income tax limits, that without which we would be in dire straits. For this city to be dependent on property tax and the school district continuing to take their share, is it fair? I don't know, but they certainly get to the table first. And so there's barely anything left for us in terms of property tax. So it's absolutely imperative that we keep these things. And I would suggest from a policy perspective that every city ought to be able to do this. I don't know why the legislature thinks that they have to take this attitude that cities can't figure out what to do to raise their own revenue, and that citizens have to be protected from local government. But I haven't heard anybody complaining about our onerous taxes. I guarantee you, if we were raising property taxes, and you know, it is a very, very ridiculous thing because it sits there for untouched for years until finally the political problem is so great that you can't do anything to avoid it. And then it looks like if somebody raised your rent 200%, even if they haven't raised your rent for 20 years, you're like, this is ridiculous. So I would hope that some of the people on that committee would start talking about, you know, how we raise revenue. But we are as solid as we can be. We have $15 million in the bank right now. When we started here, we were in the hole by a lot, and we weren't even running a balanced budget. We were at a $4 million a year deficit that was actually plugged in under the plan of the structural deficit that they came up with this gimmick. They said we were doing a negative expenditure in the budget, and I called everyone I knew. What do you think that is? There is no such thing, but it made it balanced. So we were past all that stuff, and delightfully so. We don't have any pressure on us to not do the right thing, to pay our bills timely. You know, when I came here, there were a lot of vendors just wouldn't do any business with the city because they weren't getting paid. And I think my office, we streamlined our process, we modernized it, and you know, I really do think we don't. There's no lost contracts anymore. We know where everything is. We know where the money is, and Bill Weinberger was instrumental with working with me and put that together along with Mike. And Mike is committed to carrying on. He's now the new deputy. Bill retired. And so I think with Mike there, and Karen, I think is committed to, like, assumption versus Karen's committed to keeping Mike in place. And I think that's a real benefit to the city. The other thing I think is that we don't have any pension liability, which is unusual for a city our size. Real unusual. I'd like to hear about where Lancaster is in their pension liability. They always hang, you know, you're not as good as Lancaster. Well, maybe we are, maybe we aren't. But certainly motivates us to be good. So, and so we have no debt. We have positive cash flow. And our pensions are all funded. I think that's a pretty good place to start the next year. My concern will be when I'm gone, that somebody pays attention. You know, politicians don't understand money all that much sometimes, in my opinion. And so they're willing to spend a lot of money that they don't have. And then and not really figure that out until they're like underwater, you know. And so I think we need to continue the discipline of living within our means. We still have plenty of money. We ought to be able to do it. We've lived, when I first got here, the budget was $67 million a year. Now it's close to 100. We lived for 4 years at $67 million because we had to. But nobody, you know, people were inconvenienced and some, but nobody suffered horribly living within our means because we just didn't have any choice. And, you know, there's a lot of things and a lot of demands on government, and some things they can do and some things they're not very good at doing. And so I'm hopeful that there is a recognition, particularly by city council, that, you know, there are constraints on wishes and dreams, and be realistic about what kind of budget the city can support financially. Other than that, I think, you know, I think the city's in a really good spot considering where it was when I got there. It's hard for me to believe, you know, like when I first came here, Dan was running for mayor, and he asked me to run for controller, and I said I would. And of course, Dan got beat. And I thought, well, I'll leave after 4 years. And then he didn't. And 4 years went by, and I was ready to go. And then Dave ran, and he asked me to run, and then he got beat. And I've had nothing but good times working with Wanda. I just think, you know, people might have other issues with her, but from my perspective as a controller, she's been terrific. And so I hope that continues. I'm not getting involved in the politics or saying one thing or another, but I just find that she's been really good about what she does. We have a good relationship with her and with people. So I guess my hope is that, oh, and then one day I woke up and I've been here 12 years and I said, you know, I said, no, I'm an old man now. I wouldn't want to go on while before I worn out my welcome, so I thought it was a ride into the sunset. I was shocked when I realized that I'd been here 12 years. It went by really fast. I've had a delightful time. It's been so nice working with all these different kinds of people. Feeling like I'm doing something useful in my cottage. So I thanking the city for the opportunity to be useful, which is a nice feeling when you're a geezer. And I stay awake almost all day. I guess that's my report. I'm perfectly willing to answer questions if you have it.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
I've got one to start with. Since I've been on the ICA, one of my concerns has been the OPEB trust.
Yeah.
And you very carefully said and appropriately said that we were fine on pension, but you didn't mention OPEB.
Yeah.
I've also been told by people that we're just one of the third-class cities that has this problem, and that it's kind of generic to most third-class cities. Should we be worrying about that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's money. I worry about that stuff, and I don't know why we haven't. You know, this has been a legacy from the beginning of the Patent Foods administration, the unwillingness to fund that. Now the number keeps getting bigger, and I think that would be useful to put into some kind of plan. Our office hates debt, and we just hate it, and because it's hard on. If you, when I tell people when I talk to them, you know, we have a lot of people that don't have a lot of needs in this county, and I feel like it's a fiduciary trust between us and the people here to make sure that we manage their money properly. And so if we can't get that paid off and we're doing other things, I know there are lots of things that have to get done. But I look at things from a financial perspective mostly, and the city should be responsible first and foremost to keeping itself solvent. Can't do anything else if it doesn't say solvent. And so when you go back to the years prior to 2013, when we had the old mayor, things were getting done, but they weren't proper. We were postponing things, we're doing everything because there was so much debt that you really didn't have any money to do anything with. We cannot get back in that situation ever again. You know, if debt, and some of that stuff was, in my opinion, was patently illegal. I mean, that you do short-term, you know, tax anticipation notes and never pay long. That's how we got into a lot of that. They did a general revenue bond and used it for operating expenses as another terrible thing to do. Now that's it's been a long time ago, but if you begin to press you know, expenses against revenue, and you get between a rock and a hard place, that's the kind of stuff people do because they are bankrupt, but they don't say so, and they don't, but they are, and so it's inevitable that the party's going to get over, which is exactly what happened back in the beginning of 2013. So I think that there needs to be some sort of vigilance, and as long as you guys are providing oversight, that's what I would keep my eye on. Is what that revenue base looks like. I already understand that, you know, there's going to be a push for a fairly large expenditure for the market that may be significantly over what we're getting in terms of settlement from the insurance company. It's going to be looked at awfully carefully. I mean, the market's important, but it isn't the most important. There are other things that need to get done in these neighborhoods or here and there, and so while we have resources, they're still scarce, and you have to husband them. And I think you guys are in a position at this point in time to keep an eye on that, and you should. Excuse me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
to belabor the point, but just on the subject of debt, obviously, currently, the city has no credit worthiness. But that's both good and bad, because,
Yeah, I have mixed emotions about it too, because in order to become creditworthy, I gotta go borrow money.
exactly, so maybe it's.
So far, we're living on a cash basis, so I think that depriving us of credit isn't a bad thing.
That's right, that's a point I was saying.
But if you get to a situation where we tap into that reserve and we don't have a credit rating, well, you know, we're gonna be in big trouble. So I think that it's very, very important to manage this cash that we have and not get into a situation where we're forced to borrow, especially when we don't have a credit rating. Because, and we'll get one, and we could get one. And I know that the solicitor and I have battled about this. You know, every city ought to have a credit rating. They ought to, but they ought to be managed really well, and they ought to be, you know. So there will be a day when there's a project that's so compelling that we're going to need to borrow money. And I can tell you this, it seems to me, if in the middle of the bond crisis, the Greeks were able to continue to borrow money, even though they had no visible way to pay it back, they can still borrow money. I figure we'll always be able to borrow money. Someone will lend us money, which charges very exorbitant interest rates, but we'll get it if we need it. So this idea of we want to have a borrow money to establish a credit rating makes zero sense to me. Now, I'm kind of a throwback person, so you know, that's how I live in my own personal life too, which I, you know, but it just makes sense. That is not, one of the things my kids will tell you that I grew up and I kept telling them, debt is your enemy. It is your enemy. Now, if you're going to buy a house, buying a car, figure out another way to do it. And that's what we need to do. We need to live within our means and try not to borrow, but we're doing it. I mean, we figured out how to replace the fleet, how to operating capital. You know, we don't buy them, we rent them. So we don't get tied up with a lot of capital that then we have to figure out what to do with when the useful life is over. I mean, so I think the city is being managed pretty well right now. And I haven't seen any expectations about tapping into this revenue, but I worry about it. There's one thing, we didn't have any money, it was easy, because we didn't have any money. And so nobody was trying to get it off of us, because there was nothing to do. But now, you know, a lot of people out there seeing that fund balance and they're like, well, you know, the city's doing pretty well, maybe we can do something with the city. We've got to be careful about that. Make sure that the things that we do are thought through, that make sense, that make economic sense, specific, special. A lot of times social stuff doesn't necessarily make economic sense, but the economics behind it has to make sense. Okay, we're not going to, everything the city, hardly anything the city does that generates revenue, but it all has to make economic sense, like how much can we spend on these kind of things against what all our other demands are. And so I think the current administration is doing a pretty good job of, up to this point. I'm waiting to see this, what happens with the market, because that could be, that's a big number. That $15 million, depending on how far over that is, I don't know where they're going to get that. If they decide they're going to borrow it, they'll go down that whole that street again of what are we going to do. So my instinct is always, unless you can show me what the ROI is going to be, and it better be pretty solid. I mean, I better be convinced that it's real and not like. But if we're not doing stuff like that, we're just looking at investing in something because it seems like everybody wants to do it, and it's a mistake. Because if we can't figure out a way to make it sustainable, and it taps into the corpus of the city, and we're back in that downward spiral again. And boy, that we just can't afford to do that now because we don't have the assets we had 12 years ago. We have nothing really. And so selling our assets to get out of this again, it's not going to happen. It's not happening. So I just, we're vigilant, I guess is what I would say.
So just curious, talked about OPEB, we've talked about the market and parking. Are there any other revenue lines that you think are great opportunities or cause you concern that as you look at trends going forward, or are there any expenditure lines? Same thing.
Well, the expenditure side, we don't look at that much because it's a mayor's prerogative. It's something that I don't want to get involved in. I just think I'd stay out of that. That's not my job to get in there. And I don't want to think I'm doing that stuff. In terms of revenue, our revenue is just about as flat as a pancake. It was about the easiest thing to predict in the world. We got to get the same number every year. And of course, because we have earned income, now it goes up with inflation, which certainly real estate tax. And I just don't think there are a lot more sources. And I don't think people in the city can afford anymore. I think they're in about as good a place as they can be. I think it's fair what they're paying now, but I don't think they're asking it for much more. I don't know where they're going to get it. And that's something that needs to be considered when everybody starts talking about all the things. You've got to remember, these guys are going to have to pay for it. They're going to pay for it up front, or they're going to pay for it in an unplanned way later, which is just always a disaster. Because you're behind the eight ball and you don't have as many options. So I think this city should try to continue to have as many options as they can. To go fiscal options as they can.
I think our earned income numbers have been encouraging.
Yeah.
And in some cases higher than we expected, and that's a good thing.
One of the things that's fascinating is that while the downtown seems to be losing some of its vibrancy, it's concerning. Midtown and places like that seem to be doing even better. And I think what we're going to be at it is the state government has, I think, abandoned their responsibility to the city. I just cannot imagine how the state government is treating us. That, I mean, we walk down 2nd Street, and my grandson down here to the Whitaker Center a couple of Sundays ago. And we're going on, he lives in Dolphin, we're going up 2nd Street. And I was shocked. I don't come downtown that much anymore. Can't stay awake, can't come downtown. There's two sides to all of this stuff, not many. Anyway, I'm going up 2nd Street. I can remember on a nice summer day like that, people sitting along all those restaurants, drinking beer, eating food, having fun, and nobody around. Nobody. I was down, we parked on Chestnut Street, down right in front of the university. There weren't any kids around. I think that might be, I'm not sure, but it seems like a little bedroom kind of, that they go home on the weekends and stuff. So we're not, I thought it was a good try for Mayor Reed to try and get that university going. I mean, it certainly looks like it's something that a city should have. And it should, but it's certainly not adding any vibrancy to the soma. So I think we need to be, and what I guess I got down that path was like, if people aren't working here downtown, there's restaurants that have no revenue. And I mean, you can think about this. I mean, when Rico closed, it was just, I really liked that place. That was sad. All those places have had their own wonderful stuff. They just can't make it. And I'm very curious to see what people think we can do about it. But if we're going to be a residential area, my building was an office, it was a residence. I bought it. And before I bought it, they take it was 3 homes and they turned it into office space. And I sold it to a guy who just sold it to another guy who now turned it back into 4 condos. So it's the way it's going. Because there's just no way for a Class C office space to survive here anymore. Demand, they're not even in demand for A space. So but the fact that there are places that are vibrant, if we could- and I think it's a piping thing, the state's gonna help us. I just don't think they're gonna do it. I don't know if they want to. But then they have to they have to have understanding of what their state capital is gonna do. They don't want to put any money into it. I mean, I think we're doing things as a group, all of us, the best that we can. But- And they have, it's not like they're not doing anything. But the fact that they don't have, that people aren't working here anymore, there's only so much the state can do with their own. They have to generate income, and generate business, and let's face it, that was the business of this town forever. And now it isn't. And I don't know what's going to be. So I really am curious to hear what these folks on the economic development committee are going to do. We've kicked this around in the office for years. Nope. I'm usually pretty creative, but I cannot come up with a thing that makes economic sense for somebody to invest here to try and do something. So maybe it is just going to be a residential area, but where are those people going to work? And so anyway, I'm looking at the economics of this. That's why I think it's even more critical to stay on top of these expenditures, because it is we don't have an opportunity to make a mistake. We don't have any flywheel and any $15 million. Did I say it was legal? I don't want you to think I'm deserted. I'm just old, that's all. I'll admit it.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the things that you've said are things that certainly have been on our list. We've been watching stewardship of the reserve in particular. Now that we have one to watch. And I think we've all registered concern, particularly with the real property taxes and based on vacancies, the appeal rate for commercial property tax reductions, assessment reductions is a troubling trend, but the notion of turning some of that into residential opportunities, I think
from my personal perspective, I sold my building, which was an office building, to a fellow who's going to have it as an office building. I didn't know what I was going to do. We moved, my business moved out of it, and my tenant moved. My last tenant moved out of it, and I thought, I don't know what I'm going to have to donate this, because I think it's something. So this fellow bought it, saved a lot of money. And he asked me if I would go to a hearing to reassess the property based on the property values. And so I went to the hearing, and these guys asked me what I thought. I said, I paid, by the time I got done with the improvements I put in the building and everything else, I ended up losing a little over $300,000 when I sold that building. And I said, I was never so happy to lose $300,000 in my life, because somebody else had it, because I couldn't see anything I could do with it except trying to donate it to charity or something that I could get rid of it. And then in light of that, they still want to reduce his taxes. And we said, well, what are we going to do? Meets these criteria. So that's another thing that I think is. And so now they turn it into apartments, and maybe that's the answer. I mean, when they take Strawberry Square and turn that all into everything's apartments. Where do these people come from renting these apartments? I don't know. Philadelphia. Good. Anyway, I don't know. That's my perspective. Makes sense to me, but it may not make sense to everybody. But that's what I think. I think you ought to be keeping an eye on.
I have one last question. It's about an upcoming homework assignment. So as you may know, our next subject on our agenda is Mr. McCutcheon is working on the next 5-year plan. And one of the responsibilities under the law that created us, it asks that your office review the 5-year plans before the ICA judges them. So I assume we can count on your staff to give it a good once over once Brian is ready.
Of course.
Thank you, sir. I've always appreciated you and your staff's input and your view of things. And I think it's helped the board tremendously come to their conclusions on what makes sense in the numbers. So it's been a great partnership. And as the staff to the board, I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure and an honor. It really has been, it makes me feel good. I feel like, I live here and I feel like I'm helping my neighbors. That's what I told them when I ran the first time. These people said, what are you running for control for? I said, well, I used to be the budget director here when I was a child and I know the job. And I don't need any money, so I can't be bribed. And I don't care what anybody says about me. I think I'm in perfect control.
Any last thoughts, comments, questions? Well, we truly appreciate you coming today, and certainly, it's noted before, appreciate the service you've given the city over the years, and wish you much happiness, success in whatever adventure comes next.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome to stick around for the rest of the drama, but
Well, everybody knows his controller doesn't like me.
fair enough. Thank you so much. Really good to have you with us.
Thanks, Doug. Thank you all. But actually, nice meeting you all. Making friends with you.
Is it-
I'll still be there if you guys need any help.
Absolutely.
Reach out to me.
I will be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
John.
Have a good day.
Thank you. All right, next up on our agenda is our first bite at the 2026 5 years financial plan. And, we had some initial draft numbers, just kind of the top of the iceberg sketch, and Brian has some additional information. And so the point of the next part of our discussion is to have a first takes on what's being presented, and then as noted in our earlier discourse, at the next meeting, we'll hopefully have worked in the intervening weeks on something that can be presented for final approval by the board. So I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chair Hill. Today, everybody, I guess I'm up. I'm mindful of Jeff's slot for me as far as time goes, so it's nice to have that clock up on the wall. Pay attention to. So what I did, I've been working on this for a good many days now, if not weeks. Wanted to give Jeff and the board just a peek, and earlier this week just sent them out some excerpt pages of what I have here. There's much more that I've passed out to everybody than what I provided earlier this week. So this handout it's 22 pages. I'm not going to go long on each page, but to lead off with this, I thought I'd start out with the executive summary, just so you're aware, you can read that. Basically took last year's sections and edited a little bit and then sent it down to the mayor for her review. And there were some modifications made. So this is pretty much good to go. I think I may add, I think it deserves a couple of comments about two big projects, of course, the FMB Field project and Blunt Street Market. I had missed those initially. So that's the first 2 pages. If we move to pages 3 through 9, and what I'm doing, I'm taking not an odd approach, but I think I'd like to present these funds from sort of the least amount of activity up to the most here. So I'm saving the general fund for last in this presentation. So pages 3 through 9 just represent the so-called special funds of the city, which were morphed out several years ago to remove the trust and agency section of the city's financials into meaningful funds that could be budgeted and utilized. They were initially thought to be somewhat classified as special revenue funds, but they're not, because they don't meet the definition, the financial definition of being so restricted that it really is a pure special revenue. So we just call them special funds. And actually, every financial period under the audit, they're just simply consolidated to the general fund. So these, there's 7 of these funds. And you've seen them in the past. And they all have remaining cash positions. We have utilized in 2025 some of these funds to bring interfund transfer support to both the general fund and the neighborhood services. And they kind of relate. The blight fund is more codes driven, which is general fund. Page 4, the special events project reimbursement, that's of a public works nature. The next 2 pages include public safety, fire protection fund, and the police protection fund. One interesting thing on the fire protection fund, there's a $500,000 transfer in play, which is to happen into this fund this year for the general fund and then have it distributed next year. It relates to the Bureau of Fire's needs for upgrade replacement of all fire vehicles. That's sort of a plan to produce this fund a little bit of extra income so we can apply it to those particular purchases. I mentioned the police fund, that's on the following page. And the last 3 funds, there's a Parks and Recreation Fund. And there's in italics below, you'll see there's descriptions that summarize briefly what these funds do activity-wise. The Channel 20, the WHBG TV fund is very minimal. There's not much of a balance in there, but we present it. And it is available for primarily any minor capital needs that studio might encounter, which they really haven't. There hasn't been much of any kind of revenue outside of interest income. The last fund of these on page 9 is the events fund, which relates to all the special events that happen and are coordinated throughout the year. And that fund is very active, and there's a lot of good revenue generation that has occurred. So those are the special funds. I've limited the presentation on this, and I will in the final submission of our like a completed draft, which is that this is not. But we included in previous 5-year plans all the prior year activity, and that one, it just gets to be too much on one page. I think this is meaningful because we have actual from 2024 and somewhat actual already from 2020. I'll stop right there. Any questions on special funds?
They're all relatively related.
Yes. All right. The next 3 are they're non-major governmental funds, namely the Capital Projects Fund, the State Liquid Fuels Tax Fund, and the Host Municipality Fees Fund. Capital Projects is really what it says it is. Primarily, the city has been utilizing this fund to accommodate several streets and roads projects that have been active over the years. The intergovernmental line up above on revenue, that's where the grant money where the grant money potential is, either what we're aware of from the engineering department and what potentially is out there. Some of these grants are solid in that they've been approved. And that's why you see a trailing off. For next year, I have 2.2 million. And then the following years, it's reduced down because it's so difficult to know. We tend to rely on past experience. There's a lot of partnering with PADCED on the multimodal side to assist the city with this type of expenditure activity. Also to note, this fund is utilized to collect the city's ongoing hotel tax revenue, which is significant, and the street cut revenue receipts that come in from time to time. And they are significant, and they're meant to be transferred to the general fund, which we do to provide that type of revenue support to the general fund. One thing I'll note for 2025, you'll see under transfers on the expenditure side, it's a little higher than usual, 2,175,000. And I'll get to this later in the presentation. We're looking at that to draw down additional hotel tax and street cut money to help with the Broad Street Market expense need going forward. Next page is on page 11 is the State Liquid Fuels Tax Fund. This, of course, you know, is it's a restricted fund. It's funded by the annual allocation that comes from PennDOT every year. And again, it's a combination of road maintenance, supplies, engineering services that might develop that relate to, for example, street light repair or traffic light repair. Electric, PPL electric bills are also paid out of this fund that relate to street lights and traffic lights. And the capital line, again, is there's support for helping to assist some of our streets and roads projects. And the engineering department is always where they have to get advanced review and approval from PennDOT before they can proceed with utilizing these funds when it comes to project type expenditures. So that's liquid fuels. The next page is the host fund, the host municipality fees fund. And this is funded quarterly with whatever the applicable host rate fee is on the trash tonnage that occurs throughout the year. And this year in particular for 2025, other capital and supporting distributions, 836,000 is not the norm for this fund, but there is, of that chunk, there's $500,000 that has been appropriated again to assist with Broad Street Market expenditures. So I think when we go to develop next year's budget, we should be mindful of the cash position. You can see it's down to under $100,000 projected as of the end of this year to significantly hold off on budgeting repeated expenditures that have happened. That's something to be aware of from the mayor's standpoint and also from the budget side of the finance department.
Brian, Mike, I understand that it's the plan to funnel repair money through this fund for the market. Is this going to be the conduit in that sense?
Well, as Charlie mentioned, it's a huge number that's coming. So, but this 500,000 was originally, I believe, part of the original appropriation for this year to utilize this fund to assist with those expenses. Basically, it would be a direct payout of this fund for whatever expense, more than likely construction or architectural.
Sure. But it's going to, so should we consider that as sort of the policy going forward, that the project, whatever decisions, I know everything hasn't been decided, but whatever is to be decided, we think that the host municipality fee fund is going to be the conduit by which money moves towards the repairs of, as opposed to, for example, like the capital fund or some other.
Yeah, I think this is a one-time.
Okay, so you don't think this is a statement of intent,
right?
So much as this one was done through this one,
right? And I mean, the mayor obviously saw this, but I think she may want to think this more through and may not be as, you know, more on the no side that she would be on the yes side going forward.
Well, we'll just say has it back.
But
No final decision's been made on where it will live, because obviously, at least for a period of time, revenue, expenses, it's going to be a big project. So wherever it lives in the accounting, it's going to show a bump. It should be in an appropriate place in the budget, wherever it goes.
Right.
There's no, market fund, for example. There's no dedicated fund for the market, but.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
it's a
Yeah,
big project.
It's right, it's pulling in other funds. of
Sure,
the city,
it
of
almost
course.
could be.
Right,
Like the FNB field is in its own fund.
yes, that's, predominantly the senator's fund.
Right, so it almost could be its own. I'm not trying to create another fund. I know you have more than enough funds in the budget already. But I'm just saying it almost due to its complexity could have its own ins and outs.
Right, from the size of the activity
Activity,
of
exactly.
that project. Any questions on the other non-major? governmental funds?
I don't, just so everybody on the board knows, Brian said it, host municipality is the money that's gotten from the incinerator arrangement. The city gets from Laxwana. And that's based on tonnage. There's a calculation, it turns into a
Right.
fee, and then the city has uses for that money that it programs.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. I didn't mention that. That is a check that the quarterly amount does come from the authority
Right.
based on the tonnage and based on the applicable host fee rate. I'll move to page 13 now, which starts the review of our proprietary funds, which of course is the Neighborhood Services Fund and also the Harrisburg Senators. This page just shows the historic. I felt like it was good to leave this in just to show past activity. So these are the actuals going through 2024, 5 years. Page 14 is the projections for current year and future. And this, I wonder why I always leave this fund to last. It's very challenging. But there is, I think, some good comments to make here. For 2025, in particular, there's a unusual amount of transfers coming into the Neighborhood Services Fund. I have that not at quite 4.3 million under 2025. Why that's so high? That includes the recent settlement of the Brenner Motors litigation amount, which was a little over 1.9 million. But we had to figure out how to fund that, and we did to the tune of a little over $1 million was pulled from other funds. A lot of those special funds I went through had cash available to accommodate. Because this fund, it needs that kind of support. It's not a typical, the activity is not where it's so much, it generates so much net revenue that it can easily absorb 1.9 million on a legal settlement. Also, I think you're aware of what was originally sourced by the American Rescue Plan Act money. The mayor, the administration, and council approved the $2 million for related to the trash delinquency review program. So that's anticipated still to occur this year. And there was also a buildup of a little over 1 million, about 1.2 million in grant-related funds from DEP, which includes, they're basically recycling grants. 3 of them were recycling grants. One is a DEP program called Drive Forward. So that's interfund support from the state grants fund, which has helped, which will help the ending result for the current year. Same column, 2025 for services. That includes, services includes our legal expenditures or settlement of claims. And that's where at 12.9 million, 1.9 million of that is the Brenner settlement amount. So that's not the typical amount that we have for services annually. Also under transfers up above under revenue, you'll note, I mentioned that the DEP grants, the recycling grants, they don't happen every year. There's a 904 and there's a 902. They tend to happen every other year. The 904 is the smaller one, which is $60,000, give or take. The 902 it fluctuates as well, but it tends to be around 350,000. So they alternate, and in the alternating gap years, when one doesn't occur, I have a transfer coming in from the general fund to help just make it evenly throughout these projected years of 410,000, 60 and 350. It's just a methodology for a smoothing of annual grant support. So the biggest thing, of course, to note on this is how, we maintain a reasonable, more favorable fund balance over the years. And I go back up to collection and disposal fees at this line, and you'll note the increases. Now, that's not suggesting that the city again hikes customer billing rates. I mean, of course, that's something that can be considered. What I'm hopeful about this is that this city, it becomes, and I think the time is now, if not now, certainly going into next year, to become more active in pursuing, generate a better return on those past due balances, the collection of those balances. I know that's a big if and a big wish, but it certainly would be meaningful to at least ramp up the activity to generate better collections for future years. And again, I didn't say at the beginning, this is a plan. All of this is a plan. This is not our budget, and it's not set in stone. And of course, it's open to whatever revisions, corrections, positive comments, or criticisms. But I do think it serves the result of a pretty intense look at our situation and our numbers, and it can help. It can help construct budgets. It's not the budget, but I think it's an available tool, which I think, Charlie mentioned about being more mindful and more careful of where we are with our cash fund balance. And that's just not the general fund. That's this fund as well. So anyway, that's kind of an add-on comment there, but
I think the idea of moving this process that you're in to now, basically August, September, is that it's much easier for you actually to do this and then just roll into the 26 budget. It's because what you're doing here is thinking out the different funds, and that puts you in a very good position to immediately follow this with the beginning of the development of next year's operating budget. So that's the idea. They dovetail well back to back.
I think so, yes. Yeah, it's not wasted effort.
No, because
Right.
once you complete this exercise, you'll be in a very good position to advise the team on what the impact of 26 is going to be like.
And the budget process is well underway.
I'm sure.
It predates my work on this as far as, getting departments working out what expected needs are. But it'll make a nice evaluation tool to compare it. I think it'll be helpful. Any comments or questions on neighborhood services?
I do have a question about collections. I thought at one time we spent a good deal of time talking about the past due, and that I thought that was better. The collections were better, and now it sounds kind of like, yeah, maybe not.
Well, I think collections on current billings are holding up. It's just there's this big balance that remains to sit out there. It's the past due balance, and I don't have the ability to give you a solution as what's the best way to proceed to attack that. But I think that's what is needed.
Because my next question was going to be, well, who's responsible for doing it?
Right.
As a
And
person, as a city
I think
resident that pays. You know what I mean? I just feel like this is revenue. This is money that we're missing. We need to.
Mr. Chairman, can I interject something? Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Go ahead.
Couple things. We keep hearing this $13 million being banded around. I don't think that's an accurate number. I think for records, do that recently. A lot of that is money that's not collectible, either through debt. People went through bankruptcy, was discharged to a 6-cell process or judicial cell. So we have collected through Rob about $3 million on the payment process. $2 million is injected into the system, so that's about $5 million. So how much of the 13 million is actually accurate? Let's see what more. So, even though people have this conception of a high number, I don't think the number is high as some politicians inject.
We talked about that, Sam. We were familiar with the fact that the receivables are not easily defined as a homogeneous number, that they contain many different types of receivables, including things that were potentially uncollectible or not reasonably collectible, and then others which were more reasonably collectible under certain circumstances. So, because we've gone into that over the years, going back to the beginning of this board. So I think there was an understanding that the number of what we really could obtain maybe isn't so easy to put your finger on. I think the I don't want to speak for the board can speak for themselves, but I think the board's interest was more in cleaning up this situation, whatever will be. In other words, don't just keep carrying it, resolve it. If things are stale and uncollectible, in essence, write them down, write them off, and get them off the list, because that's far-fetched. And to make a policy decision, which is really what the mayor is doing, as to how you're going to approach the reasonable outstanding trash bills. Are those going to be subsidized through the ARPA money? Are they going to be going out to collection? Just make some decisions and, cull through it. But part of that was manpower. Obviously, the Law Bureau did not have resources for a long time to be able to address the needs. Some of that is legal action, and it gets complicated. So I think we understood that. There was an understanding here, but it had lingered for quite a while, really from the previous administration. So I mean, a lot of it, it's unfair the mayor inherited a lot of that as well.
True, and I think a lot of it's been cleaned up, and that's the problem.
Okay,
We have gotten a number of people on payment plans. A lot of bureaus work very hard on that.
I'm sure they
I
have.
expect that to continue. We've got probably ones that we sent out for assistance. We have a number of those back as undeliverable because the property's abandoned. At some point, that's going to go through the county and be put up for sale. So we may, before assuming we have liens on those properties, we will get some of them.
Okay. It's good that the issue is being actively addressed.
On multiple levels.
I will remain positive and optimistic. It's being worked on.
And the other element to that too is all the prior receivables, but then also on a current basis, continuing to improve the overall collection rate.
Right. Current billings.
For current billings.
Thank you.
Also to note on this fund, of course, relates to for personnel wise, the ASME contract, which hasn't been finalized yet, but there are built-in increases for personnel as an estimate to reflect what may be coming once that gets solid and fully approved. Next up on page 15 is the Harrisburg Senators Fund. Actually, pages 15 and 16. 15 is the historical. No, I'm sorry, it's all contained on one page. Historical is the top half. The projections are the bottom half. My mistake there. Of course, the biggest thing on this is, as Jeff mentioned, the soon-to-be completed project over on City Island for FNB Field Stadium upgrade. One of the major players in this is the $6 million that's been anticipated from RACP. And about that being collected before the end of the year and to be distributed or reimbursed back to the general fund. This project was originally envisioned at $12 million. That's how you get to the RACP 6 million, and the general fund would pick up the other half. Right now, it's running a little over budget, which is not totally surprising. Instead of 12 million, it's crossed over 12.2. So that's where it is. There are still expenses that are being currently paid, and but I believe the anticipated completion date of the project is quite soon. Pretty much, I guess, timed out with the end of the current baseball season. Any questions on Senators Fund? All right, the last section, of course, is on the general fund. This will be pages 16 through 22. I'll walk you through. Page 16 is the historical revenues that are listed there for comparative purposes. Down below under interfund transfers, just for the percentages, I'd like to tell you that I removed that 30 million 0.6 as far as calculating percentages, because obviously it's just a huge outlier. It's not an annual recurring revenue item, and it doesn't, if you take that out of the calculation, the percentages are more reflective of what they really are historically. Otherwise, they'd be skewed so much. Page 17 are the forecasts. And we already mentioned real estate tax. And actually for 2025, I think our budget, which is that 16.691, I think we're going to be pretty darn close to that. I think at least 16.6 million will be realized before the end of the year. And actually, if you take a look back on the previous page, you'll see we've I think worked into our calculations the downturn when it comes to the assessment values, because we had a few years where the city significantly exceeded $17 million in real estate tax revenue. So for the future projection years, I even have it reduced down, but they're just keeping it flat. Just to say, maybe it'll drop again, but like to not keep dropping it, of course, to try to maintain some type of reasonable baseline as part of our projections or forecast. The other thing I'll comment on when I get to my wrap-up page are three categories here. Our miscellaneous revenue, I'm sorry, I'm on page 17 right now. Our miscellaneous revenue, our intergovernmental revenue, and interfund transfers. Just keep that in mind. I'll circle back to that at the end. Page 18 includes the expense side, historical, and it's broken down by mainly the budgets or the city's major object budget categories of personnel, services, supplies, and other, which is predominantly capital related. And the same scenario about taking out the one interfund for the 26.2 million, again, revolving around the ARPA funds, the ins and the outs. This is the outside when the general fund transferred money over to the state grants fund to track and accommodate these initiatives that are currently in play right now. You take that out, you get a more reasonable percentage breakdown. So that's the historical. Page 19 includes what we're projecting. And it's categorized the same way by major object for the most part. Personnel is reflected at an increase. I mentioned AFSCME, and then also what's still yet to come, and it's still in the early stages, would be the Bureau of Police contract for starting next year. Medical, keeping that at 13 million. I think the city right now is pretty much on track again. Well, not again, but to hit that 13 million. Last year, we had an excessive year where we were up over 15.3 million in medical expenditure claims. So at least that's good news, not expecting the same type of result this year. Services and supplies are listed there. They're factored in at modest increases to be reasonable. The other operating line, and this needs to be, again, this to the mayor's satisfaction, that the city continues to fund. Really three things make up this line, which is the support operational funding for the redevelopment authority, which tends to be around $400,000. The ongoing 5 to 7 free parking initiative that the city partners with the county and downtown improvement. And what is CAT? Susquehanna Regional Transportation Board, the local support that the city provides, and that now is up over $400,000 on an annual basis. Debt service, it's classified that way, but really it's that debt that was issued by the redevelopment authority on the Verizon Commonwealth Tower debt, and the city has that obligated minimum payment requirement, which is what those numbers represent going forward. I believe 2032 is the final year, so we're not there yet, but for the final minimum payment on that debt.
So it was a pass-through from the redevelopment authority, or is it in the name of the city? Actually?
Well, it's the 1998 series bonds that they were issued by the redevelopment authority, but the city is the guarantor of the debt, which kicked in a few years ago as far as helping to fund. The city doesn't pay the actual debt service requirement is better than double these amounts.
Correct.
Right. And it's how does that done? That's predominantly the lease revenue that comes in.
Sure.
Right. And also any conditional rent that may come from Harristown Development Corporation.
Right.
So it combined with what the city has to contribute is enough to cover it's like 2.1, 2.2 million in
I was
debt
just
service.
speculating in my head about ways to escape the obligation, repackage the obligation.
Yeah, and I know that was born out of a strong plan. One of the.
I understand, but enough time has passed now that it's.
Yeah.
We can sit around and think, is there another vehicle to move this debt in a better way from the city's point of view? For example, paying it off or paying off our obligation to it, you know what I'm saying, in one nut as opposed to annualized. Now that it's not entirely up to us, because as you explained, we're only one partner in the debt obligation. But the question to my mind was, if it could save money and if we had the resources.
Right, kind of like the AMBAC.
Kind of like the
For
AMBAC, where we
various-
said, here we're gonna put this, this much aside now, and that might sunset our obligation enough to get us all the way to, what was the 20?
I think 32.
So,
Right.
but as opposed to paying annualized to 2032, we'll pay X now and get it off our books.
Oh, it's-
I don't know.
Good
I don't know what that number is, whether that works into our budget, but.
and how complicated it might be to sift through that, because again, this is not, whereas the AMBAC.
Right, it's not ours.
It was our debt, but this is similar to the, you might remember that when the city defeased the stadium bonds.
Correct. Yeah,
Again, issued by HRA,
right,
but the city had to guarantee it.
right.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it is putting an annualized drain on resources.
Yep.
So you have to do cost benefit analysis as to, is it better to just spend money every year for that obligation, or spend more money, but have the obligation
To be done with it.
to be done with it? I don't know the answer, but it's a question to be asked. Always trying to be great.
I can appreciate that. So the last item or line on this page, capital expenditures, if you go to page 20, there is the breakdown of, for the general fund, which shows the corresponding amounts and their totals. The ones that stand out, of course, are at the bottom under facilities maintenance and special projects, the Broad Street Market. And in talking with the director of facilities maintenance, he's suggesting that for what's left time-wise for the market, it's like an 18-month estimated period to kick off in October of this year. So you have, of course, 3 months this year, you have the full year next year, and then the first 3 months of 2027. And he suggested that the spend, and again, this is an estimate, but the idea would be maybe about 40% what will have to be spent before this year is over. 45% for next year, and then 15% finally in 2027. And the reason the 40% is so much for this year, it's right now the city's in the process of receiving bids, predominantly construction bids for the real heavy lift that's coming. And Director Baker anticipates a lot of upfront payments that will have to be made related to whichever bids get approved. So we're always working with encumbrances versus actual spend. The idea is that we need to fully encumber everything. We won't spend like $19 million by this year. It's going to be spread over these 18 months. So that's a different discussion. On the budget side, that's why we're strategizing right now to try to come up with how do we get enough budget in the current year's budget to accommodate what's going to be encumbered for the end of the year. So that's trying to be developed as I speak. The various other line below Broad Street Market, and again, this is based on what I've seen so far, includes ongoing renovations for the public safety building, a security system for the police substation, related to Parks and Rec buildings and facilities. For the mansion, there's the roof in need of repair, related work on the brownstone building, and also for, again, public safety and city government center, generator circuit expansion system, and modernizing the elevator in the public safety building. That all goes into that 1.679 million line for what we're forecasting for 2025. And then the rest of it is just based on the budget manager has received a wish list of numbers and projects, but for next year, but I can't see them being all accommodated next year because of how heavy some of them. So I have spread them out over these projection years to be a little more accommodating. All right, so you have revenue, we have expense. Last two pages here, page 21. This is normally what you see right at the beginning of the 5-year plan document for the general fund. It's the summary of everything I've gone through so far: revenue, expense, capital, and of course the change in fund balance and how it translates to the end of 2029. Now, to get to this is something more meaningful. On the final page, on page 22, I thought this was a good exercise to do. And the idea is to take our revenue totals that we're stating from that previous page, from that previous work, and you have those totals, and then you back off what is not normally recurring items. And it includes, as listed there, insurance proceeds, interfund transfers, the RACP involved for FMP Field, and not to be pushing anything premature, because of course it's state budget related. But working with and communicating with the Bureau of Fire, there is potential for the city's capital fire protection to be increased, have an increased appropriation through the state budget. I can't confirm that, and we may not even put that into next year's budget. I just don't know. But that's what I'm hearing in my discussions. And on the optimistic side, if it does occur, then actually we would see that first payment materialize. Typically, it would happen in the late fall after the budget has been approved, which of course, as you know, it has not. So that's, instead of 5 million, it would go to 7 million, potentially, maybe. So when you back off those notable, mostly one-time things, or suddenly there might be a potential increase in a meaningful revenue line, you get down to 73 million, 72 in the high 72 millions, 73 million. That is more in the comfort zone of trying to say, what does this city comfortably achieve every year on a normal, regular basis? So I stopped, that's what's in shade there for revenue. Then I did the same thing with expense, get our totals. Now I'm backing off Broad Street Market, and I get to what's in shade for resulting net expenses. When you compare revenue versus expense, we come up short. Expenses exceed revenue in this analysis by those amounts. But then if you add back the increased capital fire protection, and again, very premature on this, which becomes a fixture in the sense that this becomes the new normal amount that the city receives, we end up, for the most part, staying within our means. And the other thing that's, I think, reasonable about looking at this is that you work Broad Street Market into your expenses based on revenue. You don't add that layer on top of everything, because if you do that, then it comes back to what Charlie was indicating about whatever it might be, $15 to $20 million in cash fund balance, and you're tearing it down, or you're utilizing it much to an excessive degree. So again, this is just a tool to consider when it comes to building the budget, and not adding on to what our expenses normally, I should say, what our revenue, using revenue as a guide, to get you to produce meaningful and reasonable budgets. Any comments or questions?
Okay, it's all up to Mr. Wood to bring it home. We appreciate all your assistance that you do for us. I know you looked through it carefully last year also, and it was very helpful. So whatever advice you could give us, I will once again look forward to it.
The last thing, Jeff, I'd like to add, of course, there's a lot of narrative that goes along with this document. And I mean, I've looked at it, I've been through it, and have done some editing already, but it needs to be cleaned up and finalized. And a lot of that includes, updates on ARPA. Certain revenue lines are tagged that just need to be updated. There's certain initiatives, including a capital improvement program study, pilot agreements. We mentioned neighborhood services, the collection rate, or the collection, how that's unfolding activity wise. Workforce data, which is available to me already from our IT department. I mentioned the 2 union contracts that are still in progress. We talked about debt. There's a couple of pages on pension, which is extracted from data provided by PMRS, and or Conrad Siegel's the actuary for the police pension plan. Kathy mentioned OPEB. There's evaluation done on that for, that's also provided by Conrad Siegel, so I have that data. And then the last page relates to the audit, financial audit, the status on that, and responses to recent audit findings. So that's what I still have to plow through. And I guess, Jeff, this is a good point to ask you right now. I want to get that submitted, but is it okay to, like, do I have till Saturday to submit as far as even, I mean, it's August 30th, so I think I'm still in
Well,
compliance.
the police won't show up at your house, Brian, if that's what you're asking. We're not that tough.
All right.
I mean, the answer is, it never is the first submission, the
Right.
final submission
And
anyway.
I know this is my first,
I appreciate
sweeping
that.
run through.
Right,
and
so
actually-
Show up on Sundays,
I work on Saturday and Sundays in a way, but the answer is, yes.
I don't, I won't give anybody heartburn if you don't get it by Friday.
That's
All
correct.
right.
It will take us some time to review it as well, and you heard me ask for Mr. Wood to help us, and then also, as I reminded you before, a copy that does have to go to the controller's office for their evaluation of the work as well. So it takes several weeks to go through it. So Saturday is more than.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone, for bearing with me. You know, I hope it wasn't too painful. Just to complete, try to do this as quickly or as efficiently as I could, but at least I feel good about the numbers as far as having gone through what I've gone through by analyzing them. So that's where I am. So thank you.
We do appreciate the level of work, the level of detail. And it's quite a bit, put all that together. Particularly as we're looking at 5-year out projections and crystal ball and all the rest, but obviously based on good experience and good business practice. And so we do appreciate that. Once we get the draft, individual members of the board are going to be asked to take a look through it, get their comments into Jeffrey, because we can't discuss it amongst each other without it becoming a public meeting. Jeffrey will aggregate that, and then we will begin to prepare for our discussion at the September meeting. If we're diligent, we'll have adoption as well. So, but we do appreciate it. We think we're encouraged that it continues to be a positive outlook over time. As noted, we face challenges, but at the same time, we have opportunities. The discussion we've had about economic development, because we aren't going to get a bigger tax base just by sitting here and watching. We're going to have to work on it, and we're going to have to work on rebuilding the community and economic vitality. And that's going to continue to drive improvements in the numbers rather than hoping a flat line maintains itself. So I'll invite Sam, Bob, if you have anything you want to add briefly.
No, I think Brian did an excellent job, so thank you, Brian, for that. It's been the last couple of weeks talking to prospective developers. Grand funding we have on. Excitement out there amongst private developers. Real. Other things coming down the line.
I just want to mention that a lot of Brian's efforts to put this together is also going to our Indian Republic City Council, which they want to see by early September. I hope to have it to by tomorrow sometime for other drafts. We're close to wrapping that up, and should be able to get the council on time.
But then we'll be at your house.
We'll send the police.
I'm gonna say Brian's.
The police to your house.
Thank you. All right, last call from any of the members of the board. Good. All right, thank you very much, and we do appreciate the detail of the presentation. All right, managers update.
All we have this time is our bills paid report for today, and I think you all received a copy of it. Things are in pretty good financial shape for us, and so we'll just keep plugging along. We're in our new fiscal year now, believe it or not. Because unlike the state, we do have an approved budget for the new fiscal year. I'm not rubbing it in.
We're working on it.
I'm sure, I'm sure.
Any questions for Jeffrey? Thank you. Last,
Oh, okay.
last is update on appointments, and I am pleased to announce for the record that we do finally have someone to assume Elaine's seat on the board, and that will be Kevin Hancock. Kevin is a longtime city resident. He is a veteran of state government, particularly human services, specializing in long-term care, Medicaid, and related matters, and he now operates his own consulting firm. He lived downtown for a bit, then he was uptown. I think he moved one more time recently, but obviously has had a long-term interest in the health and vitality of the city, and so we're going to welcome him on at the September meeting. And so saying that, we truly appreciate your time with us, the input that you've given, the thoughtful commentary and participation, and so much gratitude. Unfortunately, we aren't in a position to do like going away parties and things, but
But you can invite us over for a party.
Oh, I can invite you over. Oh,
Absolutely. That would
but
be
nonetheless,
okay.
we appreciate your service first and foremost, but also your willingness, once you had announced your retirement, to maintain the seat until we have successfully gotten an appointment in place. And so we do appreciate it.
Thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciated working with you all. Like I had said before, learned a lot, I definitely, the interest is still there, but I just want to enjoy these days.
Well deserved. Thank you. And I'm happy to note as well that we've been working with the legislative delegation for the city on getting our other two appointments. They have a couple names that they are now working through with the governor and the House leadership. And so maybe we will have news on that in time for our next meeting.
That would be great.
It would be great to, yes, have, to have multiple voices and to have a full board. So, all right, is there any other business to come before us today? All right, so we'll take public comment.
I don't know if there's anybody who wants to ask any questions, but you're all the public, so you're welcome to comment. Thank you to DCED as always for your support and participation. We appreciate it. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, nothing else, then we will take a motion to adjourn momentarily. The next meeting is Wednesday, September 24th at 3 p.m. here in this location and through the new entrance for Temple University. Now that we've found out where that is. Okay, motion to adjourn.
So,
Thank you. And we are adjourned for 4:45. Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.